Hi, sophomores. We're going to dig into a longer read here today, and I'm hoping that the title of this essay catches your attention. Sex, Drugs, Disasters, and the Extinction of the Dinosaurs by Stephen Jay Gould. The purpose of this reading is for us to learn about what scientifically makes for a theory. Oftentimes, you might be into an argument or getting into a debate with somebody, and you'll make a point about a theory, and they will respond, well, yeah, that's just a theory, in a way that's intended to sort of dismiss your argument. Saying that something is just a theory is not dismissing an argument at all. Theories actually are extremely powerful, and we oftentimes will use that term with the implication, with the suggestion that somehow, because something is a theory, that it's not true, or it's not applicable, or it's not real. That couldn't be further from the case. Let's talk about a couple of things that are quote unquote just a theory and how they are incredibly real. I think I'll start with the first one that's probably the most relevant these days, and that's germ theory. Germ theory states that some illnesses are caused by microscopic life forms, viruses or bacteria that infect us and cause damage through various forms of action with their DNA. The coronavirus is a great example of that. This is considered a theory. Something like gravity is a theory. I could sit here all day long, and this will do the same thing every single time I do it. And it's still just a theory, quote unquote, just a theory. Theories are not to be dismissed so offhandedly. The question becomes, well, what exactly then is a theory? This essay explores that concept in depth by using the extinction of the dinosaurs as the central idea around which the essay pivots. I have done extensive highlighting and noting on this in order to help your comprehension, and I will read this with you right now. Stephen Jay Gould died in 2002, was a professor of geology at Harvard and the author of many popular essays on science, often collected into books. When I was at Michigan State University in my undergraduate studies, I took a class called The History of Life on Earth, and it had a textbook about that thick. It was extremely fascinating, and we read a lot of Stephen Jay Gould. Science, in its most fundamental definition, is a fruitful mode, meaning it creates something, of inquiry. It's not a list of enticing conclusions. The conclusions are the consequence. They're not the essence. My greatest unhappiness with most popular presentations of science concerns their failure to separate fascinating claims from the methods that scientists use to establish the facts of nature. Journalists and the public thrive on controversial and stunning statements. But science is basically a way of knowing. In P.B. Medawar apt words, the art of the soluble. If the growing core of popular science writers would focus on how scientists develop and defend those fascinating claims, they would make their greatest possible contribution to public understanding. This happens all the time. We will read articles, or we will see things presented in the news. Scientists discover this, or scientists do that. But they don't really explain how scientists do it. Why this is, I'm not a journalist. I have my own suspicions. The cynic in me thinks that people's scientific background just isn't enough for them to understand some of the things that scientists do. Our attention spans tend to be very short. A lot of what scientists do is incredibly complex and requires background knowledge, but the job of journalists should be to explain those things in ways that are understandable. So my comprehension check question for you here would be, what is he complaining about in regards to the way journalists cover science? Consider three ideas proposed in perfect seriousness to explain the greatest, at the time this essay was written in like 1983, of all titillating puzzles, the extinction of dinosaurs. Since these three notions invoke the primally fascinating themes of our culture, sex, drugs, and violence, They surely reside in the category of fascinating claims. I want to show why 2 of these claims rank as silly speculation. That's just goofy guessing, while the third one represents science at its grandest and most useful. Science works with testable proposals. This is the first trait of a scientific theory, is that it is testable. If, after much compilation and scrutiny of data, new information continues to affirm, that means to say yes to a hypothesis, we may accept it provisionally and gain confidence as further evidence mounts. We can never be completely sure that a hypothesis is right, though we may be able to show with confidence that it is wrong. This is the second trait of scientific theories, is that they can be shown to be wrong. This is called falsifiability. And I'm going to demonstrate this with gravity in just a moment. We're going to apply all 3 of these traits. The best scientific hypotheses are also generous and expansive. They suggest extensions and implications that enlighten related, even far distant subjects. Simply consider how the idea of evolution has influenced virtually every intellectual field. If we take something like gravity, I have this tape thing right here, right? Gravity is acting on it. It's pulling it towards the center of mass of the Earth. So, can I test this? Sure. I'm doing it right now. Test, test, test. Can I show that it's wrong? Yes, I can. If my theory of gravity states that 2 objects with mass are attracted to each other, okay? If that's the theory, then I can show that it's wrong by taking 2 objects that have physical mass and somehow showing that they aren't attracted to one another. Now, I could do that, and when I try to do that, I'm not going to succeed because gravity is real. But it also fulfills these elements of what we call a theory. It's testable. I can test it. I can show it's wrong. It's falsifiable. I could show that somehow this isn't attracted to the Earth and floats away. Not going to happen. And the best scientific hypotheses also are generous and expansive. They suggest extensions and implications that enlighten related and even far distant subjects. So what this means, again, is that I can take this theory of gravity and I could try doing something new with it by extending it. And in this case, I think the example I'm going to use is a satellite in orbit. If this is the Earth, and I'm standing on the Earth, and I have a very powerful gun and I shoot it, it's going to go pretty far. But if I shoot it even further with a more powerful gun, it's going to go really far. If I had a gun powerful enough and I shot it, that bullet would never hit the ground because it would be going this direction just as fast as it's going down as the ground curves away underneath it. The theory of gravity predicts that. That is an extension and an implication. And when Newton in the 17th century came up with that, they couldn't test it with satellites, but we can today, and lo and behold, of course, it works. Useless speculation, on the other hand, is restrictive. It generates no testable hypothesis, offers no way to obtain potentially refuting evidence. Please note that I am not speaking of truth or falsity. The speculation may be true. Still, if it provides, in principle, no material for affirmation saying yes, it happens, or it's real, or rejection saying no, it doesn't, we can make nothing of it. It must simply stand forever as an intriguing idea. In other words, if a hypothesis is presented, a theory, and it can't be tested, it's just sort of interesting, and it's fun to think about, but it's not science. Useless speculation turns in on itself and leads nowhere. Good science, containing both seeds for its potential refutation, meaning showing it's wrong, and implications for more and different testable knowledge, reaches out. But enough preaching. Let's move on to dinosaurs and the 3 proposals for their extinction. These first 2 were totally legit up until the 80s. I'd never heard of these before I read this essay, and they're hilarious. Number 1, sex. Testes. Yes, those. Function only in a narrow range of temperature. Those of mammals hang externally in a scrotal sac because internal body temperatures are too high for their proper function. A worldwide rise in temperatures at the close of the Cretaceous period, when dinosaurs lived, caused the testes of dinosaurs to stop functioning and led to their extinction by sterilization of the males. Wow, that's interesting. Never heard of that one before. There's a reason for that. Okay, hypothesis number 2. I'm not going to call this a theory because it doesn't fulfill the requirements. Drugs. Drugs, man. Good drugs are bad. Okay, don't do drugs. Okay, especially if you're a dinosaur, don't do dinosaur drugs. Angiosperms, which are flowering plants, first evolved toward the end of the dinosaurs' reign. Many of these plants contain psychoactive agents like cannabis, THC, opiates, LSD. These are avoided by mammals today as a result of their bitter taste. Dinosaurs had neither the means to taste the bitterness nor livers effective enough to detoxify the substances. They died of massive overdoses. Wow. Also, not something we learned in school, for good reason. Third hypothesis. This one's a theory. Disaster. A large comet or asteroid struck the Earth some 65 million years ago, lofting a cloud of dust into the sky and blocking sunlight, thereby suppressing photosynthesis, so drastically lowering world temperatures that dinosaurs and hosts of other creatures became extinct. Before analyzing these 3 tantalizing statements, we must establish a basic ground rule often violated in proposals for the dinosaurs' demise. There is no separate problem of the extinction of dinosaurs. Too often we divorce specific events from their wider contexts and systems of cause and effect. The fundamental fact of dinosaur extinction is its synchrony, meaning at the same time, with the demise of so many other groups across a wide range of habitats from terrestrial to marine. In other words, the dinosaurs were not the only life form to go extinct at this time. A ton of other life forms also went extinct at the same moment in time. So there's no separate problem because the dinosaurs were not alone in their extinction. A lot of theories don't account, or hypotheses don't account for that. The sex hypothesis doesn't, it just talks about dinosaurs, and the drugs hypothesis only talks about dinosaurs as well. The history of life has been punctuated by brief episodes of mass extinctions. These are called, I learned about these in that class I was referring to at Michigan State. They're called MEVs, mass extinction events, or A recent analysis by University of Chicago paleontologists Jack Subkowski and Dave Raup, based on the best and most exhaustive tabulation of data ever assembled, shows clearly that 5 episodes of mass dying stand well above the background extinctions of normal times. It has held up over time, and we are currently in the 6th mass extinction event called the Holocene or the Anthropocene extinction due to human activities. Unfortunately, 96% of all land-based mammal life right now, all wildlife, 96% of it is humans and our livestock. Only 4% of animal life on Earth left is wild animal life. When we consider all mass extinctions, large and small, they seem to fall in regular 26 million year cycle. The Cretaceous debacle, which occurred 65 million years ago and separated what are called the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic eras of our geological timescale, ranks prominently among the 5. Nearly all marine plankton, which were single-celled floating creatures, died with geological suddenness. Among marine invertebrates, nearly 15% of all families perished, including many previously dominant groups. especially the ammonites, which are relatives of squids and coiled shells. It's what Stephen Jay Gould is holding in this image right here is an ammonite. Gone at the same time. On land, the dinosaurs disappeared after 100 million years of unchallenged domination. In this context, speculations limited to dinosaurs alone ignore the larger phenomenon. We need a coordinated explanation for a system of events that includes the extinction of dinosaurs as just one component. Thus, it makes little sense, though it may fuel our desire to view mammals as the inevitable inheritors of the Earth, to guess that dinosaurs died because small mammals ate their eggs. That's a perennial favorite among untestable speculations. It seems most unlikely that some disaster peculiar just to dinosaurs befell these massive beasts, and that the debacle happened to strike just when one of history's 5 great dyings had enveloped the Earth for completely different reasons. The testicular theory, an old favorite from the 1940s, had in its root an interesting and thoroughly respectable study of temperature tolerances in the American alligator, published in the Staid Bulletin of the American Museum of Natural History in 1946 by 3 experts on living and fossil reptiles, E. H. Colbert, my own first teacher in paleontology, R. B. Coles, and C. M. Bogert. The first sentence of their summary reveals a purpose beyond alligators. Quote, "This report describes an attempt to infer the reactions of extinct reptiles, especially the dinosaurs, to high temperatures as based upon reactions observed in the modern alligator. They studied, by rectal thermometry, yowzas, the body temperatures of alligators under changing conditions of heating and cooling." Well, let's face it, you wouldn't want to try sticking a thermometer under a gator's tongue. Yeah, I really wouldn't want to try sticking. Okay, anyways, the predictions under test go way back to an old theory, first stated by Galileo in the 1630s: the unequal scaling of surfaces and volumes. There's a little math here, but I'll explain it. As an animal or any object grows, provided its shape doesn't change, the surfaced areas must increase more slowly than the volumes, since surfaces get larger as length squared, while volumes increase much more rapidly as length cubed. In other words, the larger an animal is, the more slowly it's going to heat or cool, and the opposite for smaller animals. The Earth, for example, is huge, right? The bigger that it gets, it has a large surface area, but its volume is many, many, many orders of magnitude bigger than just the surface area. The Earth is still cooling down. It's why we have volcanoes and lava. The inside of the Earth is still melted and hot from its formation. Some of that is being driven by radioactive elements, though, as well, just FYI. Therefore, small animals have high ratios of surface to volume, while large animals cover themselves with relatively little surface. Among cold-blooded animals lacking any physiological mechanism for keeping their temperatures constant, small creatures have a hell of a time keeping warm because they lose so much heat through their relatively large surfaces. On the other hand, large animals with their relatively small surfaces may lose heat so slowly that once warm, they may maintain effectively constant temperatures against ordinary fluctuations of climate. In fact, the resolution of the hot-blooded dinosaur controversy that burned so brightly a few years back may be simply that. While large dinosaurs possessed no physiological mechanism for constant temperature, in other words, they can't sweat, they can't pant like dogs and humans do, well, vice versa, you know what I mean, and were not therefore warm-blooded in the technical sense, their large size and relatively small surface area kept them warm. Colbert, Cowles, and Bogert compared the warming rates of small and large alligators. As predicted, the small fellows heated up and cooled down more quickly. When exposed to a warm sun, a tiny 50-gram alligator heated up 1 degree Celsius every minute and a half, while a large alligator, 260 times bigger at 13,000 grams, took 7.5 minutes to gain 1 degree. Extrapolating up to an adult 10-ton dinosaur, they concluded that a 1 degree rise in body temperature would take 86 hours. If large animals absorb heat so slowly through their relatively small surfaces, they will also be unable to shed any excess heat gained when temperatures rise above a favorable level. The authors then guessed that large dinosaurs lived at or near their optimum temperatures. Gould suggested that a rise in global temperatures just before the Cretaceous extinction caused the dinosaurs to heat up beyond their optimal tolerance, and being so large they couldn't shed that unwanted heat. In a most unusual statement within a scientific paper, Colbert and Bogert then explicitly disavowed this speculative extension of their empirical work on alligators. In other words, they said, this is just talking about alligators. We're not talking about dinosaurs. Definitely not talking about dinosaurs, just alligators. Coles conceded that this excess heat probably wasn't enough to kill or even enervate, meaning slow them down, the great beasts. But since testes often function only within a narrow range of temperature, he proposed that this global rise might have sterilized all the males, causing the extinction by natural contraception. The overdose theory has recently been supported by UCLA psychiatrist Ronald K. Siegel. Siegel has gathered, he claims, more than 2,000 records of animals who, when given access, administer various drugs to themselves, from a mere swig of alcohol to massive doses of the big H, heroin. Elephants will swill the equivalent of 20 beers at a time, but do not like alcohol in concentrations greater than 7%. In a silly bit of anthropocentric, that means explaining animal behaviors as though they were humans, speculation, Siegel states that, quote, elephants drink, perhaps to forget the anxiety produced by shrinking rangeland and the competition for food. Since fertile imaginations can apply almost any hot idea to the extinction of dinosaurs, Siegel found a way. Flowering plants did not evolve until late in the dinosaurs' reign. These plants also produce an array of aromatic, amino acid-based alkaloids, major group of psychoactive agents, chemicals that produce a high or a hallucination. Most mammals are smart enough to avoid these potential poisons. The alkaloids don't taste good. They're bitter. In any case, we mammals have livers happily supplied with the capacity to detoxify them. But, Siegel speculates, perhaps dinosaurs could neither taste the bitterness nor detoxify the substances once ingested. He recently told members of the American Psychological Association, I'm not suggesting that all dinosaurs OD'd on plant drugs, but it certainly was a factor. He also argued that death by overdose may help explain why so many dinosaur fossils are found in contorted positions. Do not go gentle into that good night. Extraterrestrial catastrophes have long pedigrees in the popular literature of extinction. But the subject exploded again in 1979 after a lull when the father-son physicist-geologist team of Lewis and Walter Alvarez proposed that an asteroid, some 10 kilometers in diameter, that's like as big as Manhattan. Bigger than that, what's the island New York is on? I'm not good in terms of geography. That struck the Earth 65 million years ago. Comets rather than asteroids have since gained favor. Good science is self-corrective. The force of such a collision would be immense, greater by far than the megatonnage of all the world's nuclear weapons. That's putting it mildly. This thing would have been disastrous. In trying to reconstruct a scenario that would explain the simultaneous dying of dinosaurs on land and so many creatures in the sea, the Alvarezes proposed that a giant dust cloud generated by particles blown aloft in the impact would so darken the Earth that photosynthesis would cease and temperatures would drop precipitously, that means rapidly and in great volume. Rage against the dying of the light. The single-celled photosynthetic oceanic plankton, with life cycles measured in weeks, would perish outright, but land plants might survive through the dormancy of their seeds. Land plants were not much affected by the Cretaceous extinction, and any adequate theory must account for that curious pattern of differential survival. Dinosaurs would die by starvation and freezing. Small, warm-blooded mammals with more modest requirements for food and better regulation of body temperature would squeak through. Let the bastards freeze in the dark, as the bumper stickers of our chauvinistic neighbors in Sunbelt states proclaimed several years ago during the Northeast winter oil crisis happened back in the 80s. Let's take a look at what this disaster might have looked like. Oh! Touchdown. It's a big bomb. Interesting Pink Floyd choice of music on this one. I like it. See ya, islands. Nice looking mohawk there, Earth. Yeah. This impact would have been disastrous. And I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but when that asteroid hit the ocean, it didn't hit the water. The energy was so great, it boiled the ocean away all the way down to the bedrock at the ocean floor, and then boiled that away a good 20 or 30 kilometers. That's like the distance between here and Lansing, probably, down into the Earth, and all of that exploded up into the atmosphere. We do know that this happened, by the way. There's some more evidence I'll show you guys in a little bit that was found after this essay was written. All three theories, testicular malfunction, psychoactive overdosing, and asteroidal zapping, grab our attention mightily. As pure phenomenology, things that happen, they rank about equally high on any hit parade of primal fascination. Yet one represents expansive science, the other's restrictive and untestable speculation. The proper criterion lies in evidence and methodology. We must probe behind the superficial fascination of particular claims. How could we possibly decide whether the hypothesis of testicular frying is right or wrong? We would have to know things about the fossil record the fossil record cannot provide. What temperatures were optimal for dinosaurs? Could they avoid the absorption of excess heat by staying in the shade or in caves? At what temperatures did their testicles cease to function? Were late Cretaceous climates ever warm enough to drive the internal temperatures of dinosaurs close to this ceiling? Testicles simply don't fossilize, and how could we infer their temperature tolerances even if we did? In short, Coles' hypothesis is only an intriguing speculation leading nowhere. The most damning statement against it appeared right in the conclusion of Colbert, Coles, and Bogart's paper when they admitted, quote, "It is difficult to advance any definite arguments against this hypothesis." My statement may seem paradoxical. In other words, if you can't argue against their hypothesis, meaning you can't test it, then it's not really a theory. Isn't a hypothesis really good if you can't devise any arguments against it? Quite the contrary. It's simply untestable and unusable. Doesn't count as a theory. Siegel's overdosing has even less going for it. At least Coles extrapolated his conclusion from some good data on alligators, and he didn't completely violate the primary guideline of citing dinosaur extinction in the context of a general mass dying, for rise in temperature could be the root cause of a general catastrophe, zapping dinosaurs by testicular malfunction and different groups for other reasons. But Siegel's speculation cannot touch the extinction of ammonites or ocean plankton. Doesn't explain the heating of the atmosphere. Doesn't explain the extinction of plankton and stuff either. Diatoms make their own food with good sweet sunlight. They don't OD on chemicals of terrestrial plants. It is simply a gratuitous, attention-grabbing guess. It cannot be tested, for how can we know what dinosaurs tasted and what their livers could do? Livers don't fossilize any better than testicles. Never thought you'd hear that sentence today, did ya? The hypothesis doesn't even make sense in its own context. Angiosperms, again flowering plants, were in full flower 10 million years before the dinosaurs went the way of all flesh, before they died. Why did it take so long? As for the pains of a chemical death recorded in contortions of fossils, I regret to say, or rather I'm pleased to note for the dinosaurs' sake, that Siegel's knowledge of geology must be a bit deficient. Muscles contract after death, rigor mortis, and geological strata, the layers of the earth, rise and fall with motions of the earth's crust after burial, more than enough reason to distort a fossil's pristine appearance. The impact story, on the other hand, has a sound basis in evidence. It can be tested, extended, refined, and, if wrong, disproved. All of those things have been done except the disproving. It has not been disproved. The Alvarezes did not just construct an arresting guess for public consumption. They proposed their hypothesis after laborious geochemical studies with Frank Asaro and Helen Michael had revealed a massive increase of the element iridium in rocks deposited right at the time of extinction. Iridium, a rare metal of the platinum group, is virtually absent from indigenous, that means native, rocks on Earth's crust. Most of our iridium arrives on extraterrestrial objects that strike the Earth. I'm going to show you this in 1 second here with an image. The Alvarez hypothesis bore immediate fruit. Based originally on evidence from 2 European localities, it led geochemists throughout the world to examine other sediments of the same age. When you dig down in the Earth, you find layers that are the same age all over the planet. They found abnormally high amounts of iridium everywhere they went, from continental rocks of the western United States to deep sea cores from the South Atlantic. This is actually called, in geology, this is called the KT boundary, the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary. Anywhere you go on the Earth, you can see it. It's that black line right down there that extends. Clearly, you can see it extending horizontally under these mountains. It's black, it's full of charred, burned things, and it's also full of iridium, which is only found in great quantities in asteroids that come from outer space. So, some strong actual evidence. Coles proposed his testicular hypothesis in the mid-1940s. Where has it gone since then? Absolutely nowhere, because scientists can do nothing with it. The hypothesis must stand as a curious appendage to a solid study of alligators. Siegel's overdose scenario will also win a few press notices and fade into oblivion. The Alvarez's asteroid falls into a different category altogether, and much of the popular commentary has missed this essential distinction by focusing on the impact itself and its attendant results, and forgetting what really matters to scientists: the iridium. If you talk just about asteroids, dust, and darkness, you tell stories no better and no more entertaining than fried testicles or terminal trips. And it's the iridium, the source of testable evidence, that counts and forges the crucial distinction between speculation, that's just guessing, and science. Since then, we have found the Chicxulub crater. We found the crater where the asteroid impact likely happened, and it is off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, and it was found by studying the frequency, these little blue dots forming a ring there. Those are called cenotes. A cenote is like an open well, a circular well that goes down into the earth and usually ends with seawater or sometimes fresh water, I guess. And they formed this curious ring, and it extended out into the ocean as well. And when they went and examined it, they found all the evidence you would expect of an enormous asteroid impact from 65 million years ago. The proof, to twist a phrase, lies in the doing. Coles' hypothesis has generated nothing in 35 years. Since its proposal in 1979, the Alvarez hypothesis has spawned hundreds of studies, a major conference, and attendant publications. Geologists are fired up. They're looking for iridium at all other extinction boundaries. Every week exposes a new wrinkle in the scientific press. Further evidence that the Cretaceous iridium represents extraterrestrial impacts and not indigenous, that means of the earth, volcanoes, continues to accumulate. As I revive this essay in November of 1984, this paragraph will be out of date when the book is published. New data include chemical signatures of other isotopes, indicating unearthly provenance, sources of other chemicals that have isotopes not found on Earth. Glass spherules of size and sort produced by impact and not by volcanic eruptions, and high-pressure varieties of silica formed, so far as we know, only under tremendous shock of impact. My point is this. Whatever the eventual outcome, I suspect it will be positive. The Alvarez hypothesis is exciting, fruitful science because it generates tests, provides us with things to do, and expands outward. We're having fun, battling back and forth, moving toward a resolution, extending the hypothesis beyond its original scope. As just one example of the unexpected, distant cross-fertilization that good science engenders, the Alvarez hypothesis made a major contribution to a theme that has riveted public attention in the last few months. Now, this article was written at the height of what was called the Cold War between the United States and Soviet Russia, in which we were threatening each other with tens of thousands of nuclear bombs pointed at all times, ready to go. The so-called nuclear winter. In a speech delivered in 1982, Luis Alvarez calculated that the energy of a 10-kilometer asteroid would release on impact. He compared such an explosion with full nuclear exchange and implied that all-out atomic war might unleash similar consequences. This theme of impact leading to massive dust clouds and falling temperatures formed an important input to the decision of Carl Sagan and a group of colleagues to model the climactic consequences of nuclear holocaust. Full nuclear exchange would probably generate the same kind of dust cloud and darkening that may have wiped out the dinosaurs. Temperatures would drop precipitously and agriculture might become impossible. Avoidance of nuclear war is fundamentally an ethical and a political imperative, but we must know the factual consequences to make firm judgments. I am heartened by a final link across disciplines and deep concerns. Another criterion, by the way, of science at its best. A recognition of the very phenomenon that made our evolution possible by exterminating the previously dominant dinosaurs and clearing a way for the evolution of large mammals, including us, might actually help to save us from joining those magnificent beasts in contorted poses among the strata of the earth. In other words, think about this for a minute. An asteroid destroyed the dinosaurs, and it gave way for the rise of mammals. That's us. And eventually we developed enough science and technology to study that impact, and if we detect one coming in the future, we might be able to avoid it because of the previous one that happened. That is some cool stuff to think about.